Hey guys, welcome back to Zane Customs, and this week I'm going to be working on another custom D&D figure. So a few months ago I sculpted a fairy, and there's a full video on that if you want to check that out. But anyways, I sculpted a fairy and I still had this base model, a female base model left from that, so I decided to just use that as a base to get started with, just because usually I don't have much time to do these sculptures, so I need to get them done pretty quick, so just be faster that way. So that's why this time I'm starting off completely just in ZBrush and didn't really need to start in Forger at all. And you'll see as the video goes on, I end up cutting the head off this one and using one of the ZBrush preset female head models, just because I was having so much trouble with it. And heads are easily the hardest thing for me, my weakest skill as far as sculpting goes, and female heads are a lot harder for me than male heads, so I struggle with this one a lot, but by the end it ends up looking pretty good. But I do end up cutting it off and just getting a whole new model for that one. And you can see here I also just tried to throw in some pre-made lips, and I worked on this face a lot, but I started to realize that I was spending too much time on it to make it look good. So, I wasn't going to have enough. If I just kept working on it, I wasn't going to end up having enough time to work on, the whole body and armor and everything in order to get it done in the amount of time I needed. So I do eventually scrap it. But I did try hard for a while to just try and make this face work. But again, faces are just sculpting faces is my worst skill, and something I want to get better at, and I definitely need to practice that more, but just have a lot of trouble with. And this is another in a series of D&D or custom D&D figures I'm doing. For any of you who watch my old videos, you might remember for a while there I did a lot of custom D&D figures, and I basically do these D&D figures in two different sets. I have the first set, which is all my D&D players, all my friends that who actually are playing. They made up their own custom character, obviously for the D&D campaign, so I sculpted those out, and those are a lot more intricate and dynamic pose-wise and things like that. And then you have the gods, which are basically just the gods of this fantasy world, and I like to print these statues out or sculpt these up and then print them out and give them to the players as we go along through the campaign. So this is another one of the god characters, and she's the god of the hunt. So you'll see as I go on, I end up giving her a bow and antlers and a bunch of other things, because she's the god of the hunt, and I had some basically different types of lore that I needed to kind of carry over and show throughout her design. But having said that, she is another one of the god characters, so they're pretty basic as far as positioning goes. If you go back and watch, I have a video, I think it's titled something like recreating my very first sculpture ever, and in that one it's the god of war, and his name's Nemean. And if you see the video thumbnail, he's the guy that has a giant lion mane on his head. And I did that one, and then another one, which is another god based off of the Greek Hydra. And basically all these statues of these gods are super basic pose-wise. They're just kind of standing there with their arms to their side, or maybe folding their arms, something like that. But they're pretty basic because I designed these characters a long time ago when I was first coming up with the ideas for this D&D campaign. So all these sculptures are based off my previous designs that are years old at this point. So I wanted to stick to that, so they're pretty basic posing, which I just wanted to mention because that's something I wanted to get better at. I'm trying to get better at sculpting in general and push myself harder, but I wanted to get better positioning, better or more dynamic poses. But when it came to this one, I still wanted it to fit in the style of all the other ones, so I had to kind of stick to that basic posing, which you'll see later. And here now you can see I'm starting to work on the new head, and this is just a preset head model from ZBrush. You can just load it right in, and it's not exactly what I want. It's not exactly how I wanted this character to look, so you'll see I do change it up a bit, but it's just so much easier having a proportional model that's already, you know, kind of like most of the way there, and the topology's right, and so it's easier to work on the lips, the nose, and everything like that. And then from there I can kind of tweak it to what I actually want her to look like. But that's something I still want to work on in the future and get better at. One of my favorite things is being able to start with just like a simple sphere or a cube or, you know, whatever, and then be able to turn that into something awesome, you know. And I've done that in the past with some of my Minecraft creatures, like the spider. But again, I have a lot harder of a time doing faces and like humans in general, and like doing spiders and creatures like that, it's a lot easier because if parts of their anatomy are off, no one really knows, unless you know you're a spider expert or something like that. But we're not staring at spiders all day, we look at humans all day, so it's easy to tell when something's wrong, but it's harder to tell when something's wrong when you do an animal, or, you know, a made-up creature like and a lot of the Minecraft creatures aren't real, you know, obviously, so it's easier to do stuff like that. And also I do pretty well with male body types, especially if they're like overly muscly, like superheroes, or one of my first sculpts on this channel was a Venom, and I just made him massive and huge muscles and like over the top, and I do pretty well with that because that's what I've been drawn all my life. So once I got to sculpting, it was easier to relate that over. But I haven't had as much experience with different body types, and specifically female body types, so I struggle with that a little bit more. But I definitely think I've been getting better, and something that I like working on. So with this one, if any of you guys remember my old D&D sculptures, with most of them I had some drawings that I did a long time ago, basically that I was copying, you know, trying to bring forward. With this one, I did have a very old drawing, but it wasn't finished. It wasn't very highly detailed, and it just didn't look that well. So the only thing I really took from it was the antlers, because this girl is supposed to be the god of the hunt, so I had the idea of a helmet with antlers, because all the gods throughout my D&D campaign do have some sort of a helmet. Like the first one I mentioned earlier, he's got a giant lion's mane on his head. The second one has a helmet resembling the Greek Hydra, and then, you know, this one obviously is god of the hunt, so I thought antlers would be cool. So that's pretty much the only thing I really brought over, and you'll see later on she has a bow and arrow, or just a bow actually. But other than that, everything else I just kind of made up on the fly as I went along, which is one of my favorite things to do. And like, obviously, if I was doing a well-known character like a Minecraft creature, or like a superhero like Wolverine or something, this is something I would still do, where I would, if I was doing a redesign or some sort of fan art, I would go in and just kind of make things up as I went along. But I'd spend a lot more time on it and look up a lot more reference photos of their original designs to get hints of that into my my version of the model, and go back and forth with it. But with this character being a completely original character for my D&D campaign, I can do literally whatever I want. And like right now, I got these weird straps going across the top of her chest. I have no idea what that would be. I started doing it. I don't even know why, and then I thought it looked cool in the end, and I just left it, you know. And again, it might not be super realistic. It's really just aesthetics. There's no ideology behind what it would be, but I thought it was cool, so I left it. And one of the reasons I did this in the first place is because I was really trying to push my sculpts, make them more three-dimensional, if that makes sense. It's hard to kind of describe what I was going for, because obviously it's a sculpture. It's three-dimensional. Like I sculpt it on a 2D plane, you know, because it's on a computer. It's not real life, but it's a 3D object, but my biggest problem with all these is when I go to print them out, a lot of the detail gets lost because in the computer it looks, it looks really well detailed and the texture looks deep and stuff, but when you print it out, it's not actually as deep as you might have originally thought. And a lot of times in the print you lose a lot of the fine detail, like the fabric texturing and things like that. So I've been trying to get better at that, but I've also been trying to get better at just making the sculpt more three-dimensional and in general, and again, it's hard to explain, but doing something like this with the boots where I'm actually like making the boots thicker. Originally, like back in the day, if I would have sculpted something like this, I honestly probably would have sculpted the boots and they would have been a similar thickness to the rest of the body, if that makes sense, and it's not realistic, boots, especially these, I want them to look like big leather hide boots. Leather's thick, it has a good amount of thickness to it, so it's going to look bigger than your calf would originally, and a lot of times I would just go in and add some seam lines and say, oh, there's your shoe, there's your boot, there's whatever, and it just didn't look right. So I've been really trying to get better at that, and been watching a lot of different artists online, watching their processes, and there's things that I just didn't think about originally, and I'm trying to get better at those things. And also, having said that, I still want it to look similar again to my original D&D sculptures, because those ones were how can I say, they're all supposed to be part of a series. They're all gods of this pantheon, so they need to have a similar look, similar posing, and like look well together. As like if I took all 12 statues and put them by each other, I wouldn't want to have some crouched down and some in like dynamic poses, while some of them were just kind of standing there. I wanted them to have a very similar look, just because in the actual D&D campaign, these are statues that you actually see that people have created of the gods, so I wanted them to have a cohesive look, but I still want them to obviously look different, and I don't want them to look exactly the same, but there are still a lot of similarities. But then, like, this character, for example, is an elf, so I went a lot more nature oriented with a lot of things I did with this character, and like you'll see later on once I get to coloring, I started off with a lot of greens and stuff because I wanted her to look like she was, even though she was the god of the hunt, she was one with nature. She was, kind of your stereotypical elf. And her being the god of the hunt, I wanted to look like she was prepared for anything. And I don't know if I did the best job on this, but I liked the way it looked in the end, so I just kept it. But you'll see, like, just barely I was working on her boots and her pants and adding a lot of fur and leather hide and stuff for any area she might go that's snow, cold, winter type area, or if she has to wade through water, I want it to be good solid clothing that's going to last through something like that. But then once you get to the top, she's basically got a tank top on, so there's that variation or differentiation between the two, where I wasn't sure where I wanted to go with it. And color wise, you'll see what I'm doing right here. I'm coloring her tunic green, because again, I was thinking, oh, she's an elf, I want it to be one with nature. But for any of you who have seen any of my past videos, I did sculpt a fairy a couple months ago, and that fairy was very similar. I wanted it to be like super nature, forest fairy, so she had a very similar design sense to this character, had a lot of green and things like that. So I wasn't liking it. But one of the things that I ended up deciding, because in the campaign, when these characters have to do what is basically like the trials of the gods, and each god sets up a different trial, and if you get through all of them, you get rewards and all these different things. The trial for this character, who's the god of the hunt, is basically you have to hunt these legendary beasts, and going throughout it, they have to deal with all different types of environments and basically deal with the 4 seasons, and to see how they can make it through and different things like that. So what I decided is this green might be, more of her summer, maybe springtime look, but I ended up going with more of a red, which was more of a fall time look, because the majority of the campaign at this point, they were dealing with fall time, autumn time weather. And I originally, in my original drawing years ago, had this character with red hair. So once I looked back on that and saw that I was adding blonde hair, which is like my default, I always do, I don't know why, I decided, oh, I should stick to the red hair, and you know, because that would just help differentiate from like all the other sculptures I've done. And I think red looks a ton better, especially this dark kind of maroonish red. I think it looks really good with her hair and her tunic and just everything. I think it turned out a lot better than the green. But I still have that idea that maybe I could do variants of this costume where if like I wanted a winter variant, all the red on her costume would be more of a dark icy blue, and maybe even her eyeshadow here you could change to a blue. But I don't know if I'll do that. I thought that was just kind of could be a fun idea, but I really did end up liking the way the red looked, so I decided to stick with that. And like I said, I do eventually go in and change her hair back to red, and I think that looks way better. At the end of this video, when I'm going through some of the glamour shots, I'll show my very original drawing for this character that I did years ago now at this point. And in that, she was in a similar pose where she's kind of just standing and had both her hands down, and she was holding a bow. So I wanted to, you know, bring that over from the original drawing. But that and the fact that she had red hair and the fact that she had this helmet with antlers on it is really the only thing that I really brought over from my very original drawing. Just because, you know, like I said, it was years and years and years ago that I drew that, and a lot of things have changed, and it wasn't very highly detailed. So coming forward and doing this one, I didn't want to stick to that too much. I just decided I'm just kind of gonna take this sculpture and really just kind of do what I want with it. And even the fact that she had red hair, when I looked at my drawing, I was like, oh yeah, that was my original intent. It wasn't in color, it's just a sketch. So that really just goes to show there wasn't much done on that original design I had for her. It was really pretty basic. And this bow is unfortunately a little bit rushed. I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, and I've already mentioned it in this video, that I run out of time on sculpts, and I end up having to kind of rush the end product a lot, which is unfortunate. But I set myself the goal of having one video per week. But in the future, I'm starting to consider maybe going every 2 weeks, just because I want to spend more time on these sculptures. And like this one, I was having a ton of fun. I really liked where it was going, but her bow is pretty basic. I wanted to make it a little bit, you know, she's a god. I wanted to make it more ornamental and detailed. And also her hands, they look fine from afar, but they're not as detailed as they could be. And her arms look okay, I think, and I added in these tattoos because I've been watching a lot of God of War 2018 behind the scenes and GDC talks and things like that. So I was really inspired by a lot of the Norse design influences they used in that game. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot of things I still wanted to finish on this, or that I'd like to render out a little bit better. Her hair is one, for example, that I just kind of had to rush at the end because I was running out of time. So I don't know, that's something I've been considering and I might do in the future. And here I'm doing those tattoos I just mentioned, and like I said, I was really inspired by a lot of God of War concept art and like actual in-game art, because a lot of the Norse characters have tattoos, and you know, these tattoos didn't necessarily look like the Norse runes or anything. I have my own set of runes and a lot of lore that I have preset in this D&D world, so I use that. But just the idea of tattoos and the way they use them, I thought was so cool, and I kind of wanted to bring that over into this character. And yeah, you can see the hair right here it's fine from afar, but it doesn't look nearly as good as it could. I could have spent a lot more time rendering it out and just going into a lot more detail, making it look way better than it does. But yeah, like I said, I ran out of time. And here it is. This is the final renders. I'm super happy with the way this one turned out. I feel like I've been in kind of a slump as far as sculptures go lately, but with this one and my last one with the Minecraft Warden, just really been loving the way they've been turning out, and like I mentioned, I still would love to be able to spend more time on them and make them look even better, but I am really happy with the way it turned out. And I'd love to hear what you guys think, if you like this one, if what you liked about it or what you didn't. And also just want to mention, anything you see me sculpt on this channel, you can purchase through my Etsy. I print them out on a resin printer, and I'll color them up or leave them grayscale like this and ship them off to you. So you can check out my Etsy link in the bio if you want to look into any of those. And mostly I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate anybody that's made it this all the way through the video, all the way till the end. And anybody that's willing to like, comment, or subscribe, I'm super grateful for that. So thank you, and I'll see you next week.